8 p.m. on Friday night. The NHL world has Connor Bedard playing against St. Louis, Utah playing against Seattle. By all accounts, December 12th, 2025 is supposed to be an off night on the NHL calendar. We all knew he was getting moved at some point, but no one thought it would be this soon to this team or get a package this good in return. This is the craziest trade I've ever seen in the NHL.
You know, he said before he wants to play with his brothers. That would be partly out of our control.
Let me take you back to April 21st, 2025. The Canucks are doing their exit interviews after a disastrous season. To put it simply, the wheels fell off the bus. They went from leading their division, almost beating Edmonton in a tough 7-game series in the second round, and their coach winning head coach of the year in 2024, to 2025, where their two best forwards had a public beef, leading to one of them getting traded. They missed the playoffs by a couple of points, and their head coach chose to leave the team. That's something you just don't see happen in hockey. And now, April 21st, 2025, the Vancouver Canucks president of hockey operations is saying out loud for the first time, this franchise cannot afford to lose Quinn Hughes, but there's a very real chance he's going to leave. Well, start of the 2025-26 season, all the pressure in the world is on this roster to bounce back to their 2024 form, and they're dead last in the NHL by December. Well, it's pretty obvious Quinn Hughes is getting traded, but Vancouver has time. He's still on his contract until the summer of 2027. There's basically no rush to get this deal done. Just sit back, hold this guy captive until we release him to play with his brothers, and wow. Not once in the entire rumor mill was Minnesota even brought up as an option. It turns out, about a week ago, Minnesota and Vancouver started talking about a possible Quinn Hughes trade. Well, it's done. Quinn Hughes to Minnesota on a $7.8 million contract through 2027 in exchange for defenseman Zeev Buium, center Marco Rossi, winger Liam Ohgren, and a 2026 first-round pick. Why is this trade so crazy? Well, it's all thanks to one man. Quinn Hughes over the past 3 seasons has averaged a pace of 18 goals, 74 assists, 92 points, and a plus 36, despite playing on the Vancouver Canucks. Last season, Hughes led the Canucks by over 26 points, despite missing 14 games. He is a defenseman, and although Cale Makar is having a better season this year, Hughes is still arguably the best defenseman in the world, and really it's his overall impact on the game. How he improves your team single-handedly is about as good as any human to ever play hockey. Like I said, he's averaging 92 points per 82 games since 2023, but the most impressive thing about this guy is not the production. Despite putting up those numbers, Hughes has worked with some genuinely asinine lineups, putting Evander Kane out there for 20 plus minutes. Kane was sick down in Atlanta, but I don't know if he's pulling his weight at 34 years old. It's a transition game that's going to get you to tune into Minnesota Wild games for the next 2 seasons. Sportlogic, a proprietary tracking company, released their profile on Quinn Hughes where, despite Vancouver currently sitting dead last in the NHL, Quinn is still first among all defensemen in puck possession time, zone exits, zone entries, while having the second best turnover rate on passes in the NHL. Looking at puck possession leaders per game this season, this list is pretty much a dead heat race with Matthew Schaefer, rookie by the way, tied for second place, barely above Cale Makar and Jake Sanderson. And then you look at Quinn Hughes, who is 50% higher than anybody else in hockey. And that might be the craziest thing you've ever seen. Maybe it is, but the craziest thing I've ever seen is a turnover rate sitting at 9.6%. If the best defenseman on your team is trying to be as careful as possible with the puck, he probably isn't getting it that low. 9.6% is second best in the league. Hughes has a below 10% turnover rate while he has a puck on his stick for over 4 minutes per game, breaking ankles and creating highlights every single night. Okay, so this guy's sick. But what does this mean for Minnesota? Well, the Wild are a team that's had an immense amount of difficulty creating rush chances and breaking into the offensive zone. They're adding a guy who's arguably the best in the league at creating that from the defensive end. Add in the fact that Hughes is first in the NHL in stretch passes while he's averaging the most time on ice of any player in the league this season. It's as if Minnesota has overhauled their rush game overnight with the addition of one player. Hughes is that good, he can change your team single-handedly. There's no better graph that highlights what makes Quinn Hughes so insane than this right here. Hughes is off the chart at transitioning the puck into the offensive zone and creating offense out of nothing. If you want a deeper dive into him, there's a video from like a couple months ago when I was super excited about the Canucks making the playoffs. And, so who did Vancouver get for this generational defenseman traded in the middle of his prime? Well, they got 4 assets that I'm going to list in a progressively more interesting way, starting with the 2026 first round pick. If you don't know how draft picks work, basically you pick a guy at the draft, everyone gets a pick, you can trade them if you want, you can technically just pass on a guy, you don't even need to take a draft pick technically, but no one really does that. Okay, next up, Liam Ohgren. This is the element that's getting glossed over the most in this deal. I'm seeing some people say it's kind of a whatever addition to the trade. I don't know. This, to me, is easily the biggest wild card. From a personal aspect, Ohgren played on the 2024 World Junior team that also had Lekkerimäki, Villander, and Elias Pettersson, 3 rookies who are all currently in the Canucks lineup. They lost in the finals to Zeev Buium's United States team, which is really not the end of the world. That squad was absolutely stacked. Ohgren's got a rocket of a shot, the kind of shot that makes the audience sound like me characters when he scores. Straight line speed, heavy shot, but not that creative. Maybe one of those hard workers, and if you're looking for a best case scenario comparison, this is a guy that teams overpay for at the deadline in 5 years. Like no way Philly traded 2 firsts for Ohgren, and then, he has a great playoff run, and you're like, never doubt size in the playoffs. Okay. All the tools are there, but in terms of creating offense at the NHL level, it's been a bit of a journey. He might have the worst offensive metrics in the NHL, but he's 21 years old, and when he was in the AHL last season, he was absolutely incredible, like too good for the AHL. Where does that leave us? I think Vancouver is going to try this guy in a top 6 role, maybe working with Pettersson. You could see some ridiculous outcome. Petey has always thrived playing with strong forecheckers while being able to drive the bus on his own. I think it's kind of the perfect fit for a 5-game sample to see if there's any chem there. But if all Vancouver traded Quinn Hughes for was a 2026 first-round pick and Liam Ohgren, the typical calm, cool, and collected Vancouver Canucks fans would probably be a little bit glum. That's why Marco Rossi is here. Apart from the fact that his big head drawing is probably the most buckled design we've ever done, and I'm personally sorry to the guy, Marco Rossi is currently the best player Vancouver is getting in return here. He's a bit of a water bug. You're never going to be impressed with his pure assets. He can't skate like Barzal or shoot like Bedard, but he's got unreal hockey IQ and a pretty high motor. He works a cycle about as well as anyone his size, which his size is pretty small. He's actually the 6th smallest center in the league. Yeah, is that a problem when you're behind Elias Pettersson? I don't know. But I do know that Rossi's ability to work off his teammates in the offensive zone is good enough that despite missing 14 games, Rossi actually has the best WAR of any center from Minnesota this season. Actually, he's a bit of an anomaly overall this year. He's ranked as the 10th best center in the league in WAR per 60 minutes, aka how much do you help your team win per 60 minutes of ice time. Part of that is that he missed half the season and has a smaller sample than other guys around him. Part of that is because he's been really good on the power play when he's been healthy. I don't know if this WAR stat is even a footnote on Vancouver's desk when making this deal, but maybe it was. Rossi's averaging a 60-point pace since the beginning of last season. I think he probably works best when playing alongside checkers and shooters, so if I had to guess, Rossi and Sherwood become a line at some point in the near future. Unless Sherwood gets dished too, way she goes. Rossi is a playmaker first, but really, if you're a Canucks fan, I feel like you already know and love Nils Höglander. Just imagine a more skill-first version of him who's a little younger, plays center, doesn't shoot, but passes, and has a terrible, terrible big head drawing. Another exciting part of Marco Rossi is he's actually a really solid two-way forward, despite being a lot smaller. Vancouver having Pettersson and Rossi down the middle means you have 35 minutes a night of strong two-way centers on the ice. Maybe the defensive metrics improve in Vancouver after this trade, crazy enough. The defense has been absolutely brutal all season in Vancouver, and one guy who doesn't help with that at all is Zeev Buium, who has some of the worst defensive analytics in the league this season. But you know who else had bad defensive analytics when they were 20 years old? Quinn Hughes. It was one of the initial concerns with him as a player. Okay, we know how good he is offensively, but is he ever going to be able to log insane minutes while staying solid defensively? Yeah, he figured it out. He's sick. Not everyone does, but I'm still pretty damn confident that Zeev Buium will. This is a top 5 prospect in the world, according to The Athletic from back in October, and since then, all he's done is outperform number 4 on the list. He's a perennial winner who has won gold at every tournament he's gone to since he was 17 years old. One of the greatest defenseman prospects available. When he was drafted in 2024, Elite Prospects ranked him as the best transition defenseman in the draft. When asked who he modeled his game after, you'll literally never guess. You'll never guess. I'll give you $1 million if you guess.
Watching Quinn Hughes a lot.
And yeah, who knows? Maybe that one did fly onto the Canucks desk during meetings. They just looked for any prospect who tries to play like Hughes and they just traded for him. I don't know, man. Sometimes Vancouver gets a little weird with it in the trades, but honestly, the Quinn Hughes comparison is pretty good. I would say the biggest difference is Buium probably has more pure skill and is significantly worse at skating. But okay, if we're talking Buium, we're talking Buium. There's two elements that define this guy's game: playmaking and puck moving. Sometimes those two elements together, like when he breaks into the zone and chips a little backhand sauce to create a 2-on-0 on the power play. Nice goal, buddy. He passes hard and onto the tape. It's really just a consistent part of his game. It's great for breakout passes. He can really spring guys. And that's why he actually leads all Minnesota defensemen this season in even strength zone entries by pass. He's actually 15th in the NHL among defensemen, despite being a rookie. Pair that with the kind of average giveaway numbers, and despite playing this whole season at 19 years old so far, he's probably the best puck-handling defenseman on the Canucks. Buium manages the puck really well, and you trust him at the blue line to make the simple play or to think one step ahead, get a little bit creative. He's one of those guys that's going to have a lot of highlights. The playmaking was put on full display at the 2024 World Juniors when, in overtime, Buium sent one of the most beautiful saucer passes I've ever seen right onto the tape of Teddy Stiga to win the tournament for the Americans. Little more sauce, that's out of his reach. Little less sauce, that's picked off by the Finnish defenseman. Instead, Buium threaded the needle and it landed right at the blue line. Gold medal for America. The sky is honestly the limit here. This is maybe the best prospect that's been moved in a trade in a long ass time. You never see defenseman prospects this good get dished. But then again, you might have to go back 50 plus years to see a guy as good as Quinn Hughes get traded in the middle of his prime. Minnesota made a splash with this deal. It's easily the biggest trade in their franchise's history, and they are officially title contenders for the next 2 seasons. Hughes fits unbelievably well with this team. The defensive group looks unreal, and maybe the center depth could use a little bit of work, but the addition of Quinn to this lineup is why Minnesota jumped into a cup contender overnight. It's been 22 years since Minnesota has played in the conference finals. It came on the back of a strong defensive group, a surprise goaltending performance, and a star winger taking the NHL by storm. That year, they beat the Vancouver Canucks in the second round. The 2026 Minnesota Wild have one of the strongest defensive groups in the league, one of the biggest surprise goalies in the league, and a star winger who's producing with the very best of them. And then you add Quinn Hughes from the Vancouver Canucks. Let's see if they can go all the way this time. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.